The moment you take control in Just Cause 4, you're presented with an opportunity. Against the stark white background of a snowy mountainside, your video game lizard brain goes into overdrive at the sight of red, the universal signal for shoot this thing. The story implores you to move forward, but you're too busy making things explode. You maybe also mess around with the grappling hook, you pull two things together and watch the sparks fly. You jump on a piece of metal and surf it along the ground, all while this bigger thing is going on that in other games would demand your immediate attention. But you couldn't care less, and what's more, you get the feeling the developers are on your side here. This is the Just Cause you've come to know and love? The franchise that, since its inception, and perhaps more so than any other open world, has allowed, nay, encouraged you to do whatever the hell you want. Other games want you to handle this objective as subtly as possible? How about you try blowing everything up instead? Each installment since the first has placed further emphasis on this kind of anarchistic ethos, providing players more and more methods with which to move fast and make things go boom, with the latest in the series providing new grappling hook modifications, allowing you to customize loadouts with the kind of granularity that have it almost feeling like the developers opened the debug menu and said go nuts. Hell, you can even control the goddamn weather in this one. The possibilities for causing untold destruction, it would seem, are endless. All of which begs the question, why, after 20 hours of this unfettered freedom, did I come away from the game feeling so bored? Why, despite giving me options other games wouldn't dream of, does the game feel so strangely anachronistic, like a relic of a past time? Why is this game, for all of its best efforts, failing to set the world on fire? It's more than the game's wild technical issues, which, even on my fairly beefy PC, saw the game hard crash more than 60 times, but hey, your mileage may vary on that. No, for a lot of people it speaks to a wider issue with the series. Over the years I've seen variations on the phrase "so much to do but no reason to care" attributed to every game in the franchise, thanks to their almost ubiquitously woeful stories providing no rhyme nor reason to the activities you're doing. And while, as someone who has put a substantial amount of time into every entry, I wholeheartedly agree with that assertion, I think the problem goes deeper than this. I think it's the way the missions themselves are structured, rather than the lack of story propping them up, that are the main reason Just Cause has failed to gain quite the place in the pantheon of open world franchises. Less so much to do but no reason to care, and more so much to use but no reason to use it. See, open world mission design is kind of a weird concept when you think about it. As a genre, you think of open worlds as these bastions of player freedom, a break away from the constraints of linear progression. But missions, perhaps the most obvious way of bringing structure to a game's world, almost always necessitate a movement from a start to an end point. Of course, some games handle this divide between free exploration and the rigidity of missions less subtly than they perhaps could, but many games will try and blur the lines as to what the start and end points even are through dialogue options, multiple routes, or offering different tools to get through various obstacles. In terms of that last point, Just Cause 4's customization options should place it firmly on top of the pile in terms of open world titles. Just as Hitman trains you to view NPCs less as humans and more as clockwork AI clusters, for example, Just Cause 4's options are designed to get you viewing the world in a fundamentally different way. It's not about taking and driving any car you want like in GTA. In theory, these mods are about taking a car and changing it into something else entirely. A fighter jet, a flying ball of death. Actual fighter jets are rickety piles of pixels to be taken apart with a light graze. Enemies aren't threats, they're projectiles. Explosions in video games usually cause things to disappear so as to avoid getting in the way, whereas here the wreckage is proudly displayed, as interactable an object as the structure it was so forcefully removed from. Real-world things become pure artifice, means of getting you from point A to explosion B. And the potential of such a shift in viewing the world is honestly tantalizing. Imagine the possibilities these tools could allow you in terms of mission design. You need to get to the mainland quickly to stop a bomb going off, your parachute and wingsuit aren't working, and all you have is a crate. You're defending a mission without guns, enemies are approaching, and you have only the materials around you to fend them off. You know, the types of mission that could force you to play around with these intermingling systems and hope for the best. At the very least, drawing some comedy out of the tools at your disposal, and at best making you feel like a genius for cobbling together a makeshift solution that actually works. But unfortunately, missions rarely play out this way. The reason is that they aren't so much individually designed as they are one of a few types of missions stamped on different parts of the game's gargantuan map. There's an enemy base, and you've either got to hack the things before hacking the bigger thing, escort prisoners from one section to another, or wait around defending a point while someone else hacks something. And setting aside the fact that this template devolves worryingly often into an unbearably restrictive crossover of escort mission and turret section, the thinking seems to be that as a developer, you're not really providing missions per se, because missions are too constricting. You've simply provided an instance, a temporary semblance of structure within a larger playground, in which players can experiment with the tools you've thrown at them. In that sense, it shouldn't matter that every activity revolves around the same few types of mission, because with the sheer amount of options the game offers, the ways in which you're hacking the things or whatever else will play out differently every time, right? Well, no, because in the same way as the missions see you repeating one of a handful of tasks, thanks to their inconsistency and lack of usefulness in missions, the scope of possibility afforded by your experimentation starts to shrink as you progress. Your experiments are a useless means of traversal, or they're another opportunity to add to the cacophony of explosions already on show. It's one or the other. You might see your balloon modifiers and rocket boosters and envision the creativity found in something like Breath of the Wild. However, where that game established its rules consistently, from your most minute interactions to whatever crazy contraptions you could come up with, Just Cause 4 never quite allows you that eureka moment, because a sneaky workaround you feel you can rely on 1 minute will suddenly have a completely different outcome the next, leaving things cascading comically out of control. And I do mean comically. It's funny to see a car spin so hard you wonder when exactly it's going to cause the game to crash. But again, unlike Breath of the Wild, where your contraptions could actually save you time or give you a leg up in combat, given how slowly you moved and how relatively vulnerable you were, Just Cause 4 negates the need for experimentation by giving you the answer straight up. Whatever wacky scenario you could come up with in your head, there is always a more effective, reliable option. You could attach balloons to a crate and use them to fly across the island. Hell, you could use boosters to turn your car into a rocket. Or you could just use your parachute and grappling hook, which isn't only more reliable, but faster and more mechanically engaging than almost any car, many of which have nitro boosters anyway. Managing to use your retractors to surf along on a piece of wreckage is impressive not because of the fact it's a particularly useful means of getting around, it absolutely isn't, but because the game's unpredictable physics decided not to simply throw you off this time. You could attach a couple of balloons to a barrel and modify it so that they follow your cursor and wait for them to slowly move over to where you're pointing before exploding the balloons and hoping they move close enough to your target to have an effect. Or you could just use the always available guns and ammo strewn around every enemy base. Not only are they more precise, they're arguably more visually exciting, a more direct means of creating the kinds of explosions the developers seem to equate to chaos. And when I discuss the perils of allowing an optimal strategy to form in your game, like Metal Gear Solid's tranq guns or supply drops, the comments are always the same: just don't use them. But I feel like telling someone to ditch Rico's wingsuit and parachute, for example, is a bit like telling someone not to swing in Spider-Man. It just feels wrong when the optimal strategy is such a core aspect of the series' identity, and the detritus thrown in to justify further sequels feels like so much fluff. More than that, however, the game's missions simply don't give you the opportunity to mess around with this detritus. They try to create pandemonium by throwing hordes of enemies at you whose threat is entirely determined by their numbers and inability to tell where the hell any of them are coming from, as opposed to their intelligence. It forces you to react quickly for sure, but all I ever did was zip away to fire my guns from a different perspective, making things play like a particularly janky version of a Rockstar shooting gallery. Explosions everywhere, things flying around nonsensically, but at the same time all feeling so predictably dull. Missions give you everything and require nothing. You can't stand still and experiment with your many different options for fear of being quickly blown to bits, but resort to guns and the game more or less plays itself. And so the biggest threat in the world, given how things will spin out of control and will explode without warning, is often yourself. It doesn't appear like there's any kind of wanted level here, like in GTA, which on the surface seems like a restrictive feature, but is perhaps the key to giving your whimsical actions in an open world any kind of weight or meaning. It's the world responding with growing intensity and challenge to your chaotic impulses, adding to the disorder of the world while giving the game a means of resetting things to zero, precisely so that you have a reason to start all over again. In Just Cause, enemy encounters outside of these objectives are so surprisingly rare, so easily escapable, and so lacking in any kind of consequence that whatever anarchistic madness you inflict upon the world reeks of a kind of make-your-own fun approach, whose novelty quickly wears thin when you realise there's absolutely no utility to any of it. It feels like you're the king of a toy box, but no one wants to play with you, so you're stuck smashing action figures together until you get bored. You've eaten your mission-shaped vegetables in order to get to the empty calories of dessert. In retrospect, the most fun I have in Just Cause 4's missions comes when its world begins to bend under the weight of its own insanity. In the game's incomprehensible mess, two rogue pixels will collide, and suddenly the thing or vehicle or person you're meant to get from one place to another has their scripting fried, leaving you to pick up the pieces. An NPC's pathing is broken? Why not stick a retractor in their torso and drag them to the objective? A mission-specific ancient boulder has disappeared with no way to get it back? Could always just chuck some balloons on a different one and spring it over like it was a goddamn space hopper. And it's a similar scenario when the game's weather effects come into play. Sandstorms hinder movement and render your parachute wildly unreliable, forcing you to get creative with your grappling hook or take the risk of letting the wind carry you where it will. Lightning will strike down enemy helicopters but will just as easily wipe you out, forcing you to move quickly while maintaining a perilously low altitude, making standing still aiming a weapon less of a viable option. And despite said weather effects only appearing in about half a dozen missions, a strangely small amount given how prominently they featured in the game's marketing, it's here you start to see a pattern. In a game that presents itself as some blank slate playground for you to enforce your childlike will on, these scenarios see systems intersect to provide interesting restrictions or roadblocks that require some kind of lateral thinking. Moments where the game isn't encouraging you to cause chaos, but instead forcing you to navigate its chaos, which always ended up engaging me far more than the countless missions where I'd simply fill things with lead and have the joy of watching things blow up lessen with every predictable explosion. But then you begin to realise that these aren't solutions to clever puzzles the developers have carefully placed in your way. Instead, the game is placing you in a position where you must actively fight its instabilities. Mission objectives are supposed to just work in a game, but here they don't, and it's your job to fix them. And even then, like so much else the game throws at you, there's almost always an easier method to overcome it, where you're probably better off just reloading one of the many checkpoints and starting fresh. A mission where you're meant to sneak land quietly at an airport before everything breaks and you're forced to fend off enemies while grappling your teammate over to your objective, all while the game still thinks you're being stealthy, is a funny situation for sure, but it only occurs because the developers placed the hangar you're meant to land at, out of all the other available hangars I might add, right next to an enemy base, meaning you inevitably get spotted even before the prescribed ambush that occurs later in the mission. It's all chaotic, sure, but it's not too far removed from the kinds of chaos you'd find in any number of B games, where the ways in which the software could break at any minute leave you as curious as you are terrified or exhausted. Just Cause 4 merely has the gall to turn that jank, that lack of attention to detail, into its USP. With options like the ones Just Cause gives you, the possibilities should be endless, but thanks to the hands-off approach taken by the mission designers, their potential isn't even close to realised. And it all comes back to the seemingly contradictory notion that in order to truly encourage creativity in an open world, it isn't enough to give players everything and hope that everything gets used. You have to impose even light restrictions through your missions that get players thinking. Give players the freedom to do whatever they want with zero consequence, and they'll gravitate towards the most effective route over time. Place unique roadblocks in their way, limit the tools they can use in any given scenario, and that's when you'll start to see those tools put to good use. So I hope you enjoyed my piece on Just Cause 4. If you did and feel like supporting the show directly, feel free to check out my Patreon like these wonderful folks currently on screen, who also get access to things like episode soundtracks and Patreon-exclusive written pieces. Your unbelievably generous support is absolutely what makes this show possible, and I can never thank you enough for that. Special thanks go to Mark B. Writing, Rob, Nico Bleackley, Michael Wolf, Artyom Vitsyuk, Ali Al-Muhanna, Timothy Jones, Spike Jones, Laserpferd, The Nameless Guy, Chris Wright, Ham Migas, Travis Bennett, Zach Catterley, Samuel Pickens, Tom Nash, Shardfire, Anna Pimentel, Jesse Ryan, Brandon Robinson, Justin Holderness, Christian Kuhneman, Matthew Natry, Nicholas Ross, and Charlie Yang. Don't worry, I'll be back with my Game of the Year roundup before the end of December, but with that, this has been another episode of Writing on Games. Thank you so much for watching, have an incredible holiday, be safe, and I will see you next time.